ground on you,
One's
one's in
underground,
jet.
you.
One's on the ground on you, one's in jet, one's urgent.
Inside our gens.
Inside our gens, inside our gens.
Inside our gens dead.
I got stuck and I'm dead.
Go for it, go for it, go for it, go for it, go for
Hit
it.
it over. Raymond.
That's our flag. That's our fucking trophy, boys.
Fucking our trophy.
Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 13 of COD Talks. I am your host, Furs95. Lots to get to today. I'm going to break down all things CWL Seattle, which occurred over this past weekend, obviously. I hope most of you guys were able to catch the action. First and foremost, just want to say congratulations to Rise Nation for winning the tournament. They had to have been the best losers bracket one we've ever seen. They won 9 straight series to win the tournament ultimately. And I think it was like only 2 of those series went to game 5, and then one of them was a 3-1, and the other like 5 or 6 were all 3-0s. So just a dominant performance from Rise Nation on Sunday. And congratulations to them again for winning the tournament. But first and foremost, I just wanted to go over my predictions. This was, first and foremost, I also have to say this tournament was probably the most unpredictable, crazy tournament, major LAN event we've had maybe ever in Call of Duty. I mean, after day one, or really after once pool play concluded, I was just mind blown at the standings. I mean, you had Optic Gaming not making winners bracket for the first time ever with this roster. You had LG not making winners bracket. You had Rise not making winners bracket. So just absolutely insane right off the get-go. The pool play was insane, and the whole tournament was just filled with upsets and storylines and underdogs, and it was awesome. It was an awesome tournament overall. But now I want to get into my predictions, which were just god-awful. I don't think I got anything right. I'm sure most people didn't. So let's go over, I guess my predictions were, first place I thought Optic was going to win. They obviously didn't. Rise Nation was able to win. In second place, I had LG. As most of you guys know, Evil Geniuses were the ones that actually placed second. Third place, I had Rise. E United were the ones that actually were able to place third. TK I had placing fourth. Echo Fox were the ones that actually were able to place fourth in this tournament. And then fifth, sixth, I had FaZe and Splice that actually turned out to be Ghost and TK. And then 7th and 8th, I had E United and EG. In 7th and 8th, that actually placed 7th and 8th, was Luminosity Gaming and Red Reserve. So, didn't get anything right. Not a huge surprise, though, considering just how unpredictable this tournament was. And I think a lot of that had to do with, obviously, first and foremost, all the new rosters. That I think a lot of the pros were talking about how that really affected the vetoes and not knowing each of these new teams, strengths and weaknesses in terms of their maps, their map pool. That was a factor. Then you also had the new meta change. That was also a factor. We were saying, the biggest surprise to me was the resurgence of the bar. We saw a lot of bars being used by Sunday. It started out not too many bars, and then as the tournament progressed, it was like more and more teams were figuring out, just how good the bar is on certain maps, and it was really, it came to a point where I saw a lot of people running double bars on even Valkyrie Hardpoint, and even Flag Towers on some of those smaller maps. So I think the bar has definitely made its resurgence back into the meta for sure. And, also couple that along with the fact that this was the first tournament we got to play. We got to see how the new score streak adjustments were affecting things, which I think is definitely for the positive. We saw overall, just a lot less streaks being earned, obviously, because of the increase in the score that each streak is required now from the most previous update. I think that change was definitely for the better. It was nice to see. The streaks are obviously balanced how they should be in terms of competitive for sure, and that was definitely a positive change. But then you also had to talk about the whole armored tweaks, the whole division overhaul, obviously. But armored was basically used almost exclusively. I saw a little bit of infantry being used, so guys could run 4 attachments on certain guns, but it was pretty much solely armored being used throughout the tournament, just because armored is just so powerful. It makes stuns essentially not worthless, but they don't really have much of an effect. The only reason stuns were being used in this tournament was obviously first and foremost you now obviously can choose you can have a nade and a stun at the same time, but the biggest thing stuns are being used for is just to stun check areas on the map. So that was really all that stuns were useful for in this tournament for the most part. But overall, I think the meta shift was largely a good one. I would like to see, again, I do think that we need to revert back to just having one nade in total, because I think armored is too much of a crutch right now. But overall, I think the changes were largely good, and I'm excited for the remainder of World War II and to see how it evolves or continues to evolve. But with that said, guys, I am going to start to go over all the results of the tournament. And first and foremost, again, Rise, just kind of touched on them already, but just ridiculous run they made. It was really a tale of two tournaments for Rise. Obviously, they started out pool play just terribly. I mean, they didn't, like I touched on earlier, they didn't even make winners bracket, so they had a really rough pool play, and they started out real cold, but they just got hot, man. And to be honest, it wasn't much of a surprise to me. It was like, okay, now they're playing how most of us expected them to play when this roster was first formed. Gunless and Slasher were just absolutely going off the whole weekend. Gunless, in my opinion, right now, clearly the best player in the game. He's just so consistent all throughout the weekend. He really started to take over, him and Slasher in the grand finale against EG. So hats off to Gunless. Obviously, he was the MVP of the tournament, rightfully so. I think in my mind, he is definitely the best player in the game. He's been so dominant all throughout the season for Rise, and really impressed with what he's been bringing to the table. But I also want to touch on EG. So EG, obviously, huge. Probably the biggest surprise of the tournament was how well EG placed and how they played all throughout the tournament, really. Obviously, they had to come through the open bracket, right? I mean, I guess they didn't have to come through the open bracket, but they came through relegation, and they just completely took everyone by storm. I mean, it's funny. I think EG is actually a good demonstration of how online COD actually does transfer to LAN relatively well. They were looking very strong in their scrims ever since this roster first formed. And ultimately, I just think that it was I know it was a disappointing performance in the final. They really kind of choked away that first best of five, specifically the S&D. They had a chance to go up 2-0 there over Rise. They had a 5-2 lead and choked it away, which was unfortunate, because I think if they go up 2-0 in that series, they definitely find a way to close it out. But ultimately, they choked away that first best of five, and then the second best of five was just kind of a steamroll. I think EG was pretty deflated after choking that first best of five. And ultimately, Rise was just on fire and just steamrolled them in the second best of five. So, but again, I think if you're EG, you gotta be really happy with your performance overall in this tournament. There's a lot of great things to take away, and things to improve upon, and it's a great foundation already that they've already built themselves. I think that what I really like the most about this roster is they all seem to be very, very comfortable in their respective roles, which is pretty impressive considering this is obviously a very new roster. They've only been together, for 2 weeks or so. So, Aches is obviously this is Aches' best COD in quite some time. He's really impressed me. He's really adapted into that flex role well. He's a vocal leader now. He's really starting to gain, I think, sort of his his confidence that he had back when he was on top, and I think that's huge for the team. And then you also have to talk about Assault. Assault was probably their best player all throughout the weekend. He was just going off, and that's not a huge surprise to me. I think Assault's a guy that back when he was coming up in Black Ops 3, I was like, this guy is really he's the next big thing in terms of main AR, and I think ever since Black Ops 3, he just hasn't really been able to find his true comfort yet in a team. I think was never really all that comfortable with that Echo Fox team, but he's really seemed to finally be comfortable in this EG roster, and which is really allowing him to get back to that top form that we saw from him back in Black Ops 3 and a little bit in IW as well. So really impressed with Assault. I think he's definitely cemented himself back up into that top tier AR category that we talk about all the time with the likes of, Slasher, Octane, Formal. So, really good stuff from Assault all weekend long. And then Apathy, I think Apathy is starting to finally find his groove in this game. He still was inconsistent. He was still, was up and down. But overall, I think he's starting to improve on that consistency and really start to rediscover his form that we know he could be at. When he's because when he's at his best, he's right there with the best SMGs in the game for sure. And we were definitely seeing a lot of that from Apathy this weekend. Again, I think it's really hard because he's sort of he plays that sort of hyper aggressive SMG role, and it's really hard to be consistent when you're playing at a really fast pace as SMG, and I think that's something that Apathy he's always going to kind of struggle with. He's never going to be able to be, as consistent as a main AR or someone along those lines because of the fact that it's just so hard to be consistent when you're playing so aggressive. But ultimately, I think Apathy is really starting to find his form in this game, and that's got to be really encouraging for EG because he is vital to their success. And alongside of him, Silly, I think Silly had a really good weekend as well. So he was also a little inconsistent too. That was one of his biggest problems back when he was on E United, was his inconsistency. But again, Silly proves time and time again that he is very clutch. He kind of plays that karma role sometimes. He does a lot of the dirty work. He's very good at earning streaks and staying alive in certain situations. I think he's just a guy that has a really good understanding overall of World War II and how to play the game correctly. So, again, I really like the blend that this EG roster has. The only thing I think that's largely going to hold them back is that I think they are going to struggle to consistently bring that slaying firepower that we talk about that's so important against the top teams like Rise and LG. So that's the only thing that I would say is their biggest weakness. But overall, again, I think that they're a team that, Aches talked about it in a few interviews that he came in and said, look, this is the most prepared. We just out-prepared everyone this event. And I think their EG proves that this game, it takes more than just raw slang. You really need to be on the same page as your teammates, and you really need to understand how to play the game correctly and understanding other teams' strengths and weaknesses. And I think EG proves that. You see what happens when you prepare correctly for a tournament. And just hats off to EG for grinding and putting in the work. And they're just a great demonstration as to what preparing properly for a tournament can do for you. So hats off to EG. I was just, I'll be honest, I was rooting for them to win. I am an Aches fan, but, ultimately they did come up short. But I think that, again, there's a lot of positive to take away from EG going as they continue throughout the World War II season. So moving on, E United with the third placing. Very impressive weekend from United as well. Obviously, this is a roster that they probably made one of the least flashy roster changes when they with the addition of Felony, but he seems to be fitting in very nicely with this team. I think that the biggest takeaway from United, in my opinion, is that Pristini has just completely done 180 in terms of his gameplay. He was arguably one of the worst players all throughout the Stage 1 Pro League, but now he's really seemed to come into his groove and become that strong, hyper-aggressive sub that we saw in the past from him. And ultimately, I think that's the biggest contributing factor to E United's turnaround. I think that, Clay and Arcees have largely been pretty consistent up to this point in the game. Arcees has been, even though Arcees probably had one of his weaker events this tournament, I still think he is a top flex player in the game, definitely a tier 1 flex player. So, again, I think Clay and Arcees have, like I said earlier, been largely pretty consistent in this game. Clay was a little inconsistent this tournament, but overall, I still think Clay is a guy that brings a lot of intangibles to a team. And, ultimately, I think this team, United's success is largely going to depend on the consistency of Pristini and Felony, in my opinion. And as we move down the list, Ghost Gaming. Ghost Gaming was probably, next to EG, the biggest surprise of the tournament. They came out of nowhere, really. All the way through open bracket and performed very, very well. To be honest, I think this is a team that has a lot of talent. To be honest, for as far as open bracket teams go, I think they're probably one of, if not the best teams out there, alongside of maybe Lightning Pandas and E6 that did not qualify for Stage 2 playoffs. I think that, between Parasite, obviously, Haggie's a guy that's been around the scene forever. We talk about it all the time. He's got one of the best competitive Call of Duty minds of all time. And then Lacefield is a guy who has really, really a lot of talent as a SMG player. And then GodRX was probably their best player throughout the tournament. He really impressed me. So he's, I think there's a lot of talent with this Ghost team, and I'm very interested to see what they can do going forward, because I think they're rather disappointed that they just fell short on Sunday, but they have a lot of positives to take away from this tournament as well. So interested to see what we get from Ghost Gaming as the season progresses. And as we go down the list, Echo Fox was another really impressive team as well. They placed fourth, and I was very impressed with, specifically I thought Temp seems to be a lot more comfortable on this team than he ever was on Envy. I was really impressed with him alongside of Cento at that SMG role. Those two were playing very well throughout the entire weekend. I think Aqua has really started to find his return to his top form back at that main AR role. And then also you gotta touch on Saints. Saints is a guy that's just been a veteran of the game, and you always know what you're gonna get from Saints. Really strong SMG play from him, and ultimately I really like the Psycho Fox team. I think that what really has elevated their play, in my opinion, is I just think that they all seem very comfortable with each other. Ultimately when Assault was on the team, there was that role clash between him and Aqua as the main AR. It was kind of similar to TK's old roster, honestly. And I think that Echo Fox, again, I think they're very confident in one another. They're very comfortable playing with one another. They're all good friends. And I think that that's the biggest reason why Echo Fox is able to see some success this weekend. And again, they're another team that, probably, they didn't finish first, so they're obviously a little disappointed in that. But there's a lot of positives to take away from this weekend for them as well. And as we move down the list, TK, ultimately, I think TK, again, this is a roster that, in my opinion, improved overall. After the roster mania, I was very impressed with Methods. I think he's fitting in nicely with this team. But my biggest question mark with TK ultimately is I don't know if accuracy is truly comfortable as a flex player. I think that he's a guy that really does thrive a lot more with an AR in his hands, and I'm not quite sure if this tournament warrants a change between him and Methods. Maybe Methods tries out the flex role. Maybe he's a little more comfortable in there, because I just think accuracy is a pretty significantly better player when he has an AR in his hands. So, that's something I'm going to be looking for as TK continues to compete throughout the World War II season. Then obviously Pharaoh as well. Pharaoh was kind of the biggest question mark. A player that's a lot of young talent, but largely unproven. And overall, I thought Pharaoh played pretty well. He was inconsistent, which was kind of expected. But he's a guy that I think has a lot of talent, and he played very well in S&D. I saw a few maps in Respawn that he was playing pretty well in, but. Ultimately, I think with TK, to me, the talent's there. You just got to develop consistency and really just comfortability in your respective roles. And that's going to be ultimately what it comes down to for TK, in my opinion. And as we move down the list, LG finishing 7th and 8th. Obviously, big disappointment for LG. They're a team that was coming in, was definitely one of the favorites alongside, I would say, Optic and FaZe. So, disappointing finish from LG, but ultimately I wouldn't be too worried about it. They're a team that has been around for a while. They're obviously very familiar with one another. They're very familiar with their roles and how to play the game, and that's kind of an advantage I think they have over some of these other newly formed teams, despite the fact that they didn't place as well as some of those teams this tournament. I think overall, I wouldn't be too worried if I'm LG. I seriously doubt they're going to consider making a roster change between now and I believe it's May 7th that is roster locked. And ultimately I just think bad event, but I don't think LG's going anywhere. So that's not a whole lot to say with regards to LG. And then Red Reserve with another 7th and 8th place finish. And again, disappointing finish for Red. They're a team that's been in I think multiple grand finals up to this point. I know they've been at least. No, they've been in 2, right? Yeah, so, Red, disappointing, but again, them and Splice, ultimately, I just don't know what they're going to do. I would be kind of shocked if at least one of them didn't make a change, but the problem, again, with Red and Splice is that there's not a whole lot of talent outside of those two teams in Europe. I think Scraps from Unilad is a guy that you definitely want to look at. But again, I don't know if he would leave his twin brother, Wuskin, back on Unilad. So I don't know. I just don't know what you do necessarily if you're Red and Splice, because I think that ultimately Splice probably definitely needs a change. Red maybe not quite as much, but imagine a scenario where Red picks up, Scraps for Joe, for example. That would be a dirty roster. I don't know. I'm interested to see what all goes on in the European scene, because I do expect rosters to change between Splice and Red, and maybe Unilad as well. So, I don't know. We're just going to have to see. It's going to be obviously completely dependent on whether or not Splice and or Red make a change. And I think they will, but, we'll have to wait and see. And I'm definitely interested to see what all goes on between now and May 7th with regards to European COD. With that said, guys, I am going to transition over to Optic. So obviously, Optic Gaming, with one of their worst placements, maybe their single worst placement ever with this roster. And I want to go back to last week's episode. Last week's episode, I proposed a question, and I basically asked, is this tournament, is CWL Seattle a make or break tournament for Optic? And ultimately, I said no, and I'm going to stick by that. I think that a lot of people are obviously saying, oh, this is it for Optic. They're done. This is it. The dynasty's over. They're going to make a change, 100%. And, I might be in the minority on this, but I actually don't think they're going to make a change. And I don't think they're going to make a change for a few reasons. First and foremost, we've got to put all this into context, right? So let's go back and I want to make note of Crim's tweet. So Crim came out and tweeted right after the event, basically saying he was clearly very disappointed, and he basically said, we shouldn't even have showed up. We didn't get hardly any practice for, quote, bullshit reasons. And this is obviously very concerning. Obviously, as an Optic fan, I'm just baffled as to why you wouldn't practice at all for a major LAN event. I mean, it's, do you not want to win? I mean, I just don't even understand why that's even still happening. At this point in time, it's just ridiculous that they're even, that they're not practice. Like, who, look, ultimately what this comes down to me is that it looks like, based on the evidence that we have, is that Scump has just not been motivated to practice and to put the time in and to win this game. That's ultimate. That's just, and look, I hate to speculate too much about stuff like this, because I don't know what the hell goes on behind the scenes. I'm not going to act like I do, but based on tweets and based on, I think someone on Reddit commented that, I apparently, like, Karma was streaming and someone put in, like, their chat, like, we need to practice, and Scump just laughed it off and said, yeah, not a chance I get on that game. So it's just, look, ultimately, and this goes back to, do I think they're going to make a change? Again, I don't think they're going to make a change, because I don't think this is a single person problem or even a two-person problem. I think it's a team mentality problem. This team needs to change its attitude. They don't need to change a player. They need to change their attitude. And because they're clearly not on the same page right now in terms of what their goals are and what they want to do and their motivation, and they're just not on the same page. Crim clearly wants to win at all costs. That's obvious. That's how Crim has always been. He's always been a winner. He's always been, winning is first and foremost what his focus is and what he wants to do, as long as he competes. And I think you have to at least question the fact that Seth has lost motivation ever since they won COD Champs. And I can kind of understand that. From his perspective, he's probably thinking, what else is there to prove? What else do I have to play for? He's got all the money in the world. He's got YouTube and Twitch to fall back on. What else, what else does he have to play for? And if that's how he's thinking, it's not fair to his team to continue on playing and competing, because you got to be all or nothing. If you're going to compete and play on a professional level at the highest level, you need to be either all in or not. Plain and simple. And I think it's safe to say that right now Scump is not all in. And you just can't have that. And let me just also say that this is coming from me. Scump is my favorite player. He has been since since I first started watching COD and Black Ops 1. Like, I love Scump. I love his personality. I love the dude. I'm like a huge fan of his. But this, I mean, if this is what's going on here, this is ridiculous. So he needs to figure out real quick whether or not he still wants to compete and put in the work and put in the dedication into trying to win. Because it's not fair to Krim, it's not fair to Formal, it's not fair to Karma, who all are trying to win and trying to do everything they can to win when a guy is just slacking off and not doing his job. And again, I also want to, obviously a lot of people, Karma has been the scapegoat for this team really ever since he joined it, which has just been really sad and unfortunate to see, because I don't think he is the single problem with this team by any means. He always seems to get scapegoated, but, again, another reason why I don't think Optic is changing is because I think ultimately Krim is probably the one that has probably maybe not the final say, but like the biggest say. And Krim and Karma have been the duo for like a while now. I mean, ever since Karma joined, EG back in Ghosts, Krim and Karma have been the duo. They've been winning together, competing with each other for years now. And I just can't see Krim saying we need to get rid of Damon when the fundamental problem with the team is not Damon. I mean, Krim has acknowledged that. He thinks that the problem is their lack of practice. So I just don't think it makes sense for Damon to get dropped. I don't think that's the way Krim's thinking. I don't think that's the way really anyone on the team is thinking, for that matter. I think this more comes down to Scump and his dedication. That to me is the fundamental problem with this team. And look, I think that at the bare minimum, in my opinion, Hex has got to hand over the keys to Crim6. I mean, he, to me, absolutely needs to be the official captain, in-game leader of this team. Scump has just, in my opinion, completely lost the privilege of being the captain of Optic Gaming, in my mind. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see Hex making a decision like that, just because Scump has been the face of Optic for a while now, ever since Nadeshot left. And I don't know if Hex will ever make that type of tough decision when it comes to Scump, but ultimately I think that's what needs to happen. Crim6 needs to be the captain. He needs to be the one making the final decisions. He's the guy that, if you want to win, like, Crim6 is your man. He has all the intangibles. He has leadership qualities. He has the winner's mentality. He has the dedication, the practice, all of it. So, ultimately, again, this is just, they need to just sit down with Seth, with the whole team, and say, look, does everyone here still care about winning? Does everyone here willing to do whatever it takes to win again? And that's ultimately what this team needs, is a change in attitude. Not a change in player, not a change in roster, a change in attitude. And that's what it comes down to. That's really all I have to say about it. So, again, those are the reasons why I ultimately don't think they're going to make a change, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do make a change. But again, even if they do make a change, assuming it's Karma that's dropped, I don't know who they go after. Ultimately you look at Gunless, but I don't know if Gunless was willing to leave because of how good Rise looks. Gunless, really seems like a guy who doesn't care too much about, he all he cares about is winning. So I don't know. I really don't think Gunless would leave, to be honest. But that's all speculation. I'm not really going to get into that until ultimately Optic actually does make anything official. So that's really all I have to say about Optic. Sorry to end the podcast on kind of a negative note. I know some people probably like seeing them lose, but and some people probably want to see them make a roster change. But we'll just have to wait and see. Like I said, I believe the roster lock is on May 7th, so there is a decent little gap here for rosters to change. That players obviously finally have a little bit of a break before Stage 2 starts up on, I believe, the 15th. So, we got a nice little break here. But interested to see what goes down. I don't know. I don't really expect to see a whole lot of other roster changes because of the fact that I think largely all the teams that made changes played pretty well this tournament. Outside Envy, who had a disappointing placement, but even Envy had a really good pool play. They were 4-0 after pools. So, I doubt we'll see a lot of changes specifically in North America. Maybe we'll see something in Europe, but for now, I don't see a whole lot going down unless Optic decides to make a change. So that's really what it's all gonna come down to, is if Optic decide to make a change or not. But with that said, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like, share, subscribe to me on YouTube. Leave us a rating on review on iTunes. It really helps us out. Helps me understand what you guys want, what I can improve upon. Also helps with exposure. But with that said, guys, I think that's going to do it, and I will see you guys on Friday.